Evening. I think there are many friends connecting from US also today. Friends, as you know, it's a very important lecture series which we are organizing through ICAR for a very important cause, and that we all know that we are celebrating the 75 years of India's independence on 15th August 22nd. In this year of celebrations of this independence, we have initiated many activities, and one of the activities to complete these 75 years, 75 lectures, very important lectures by eminent persons. And in the same series, we have a very important topic today. I think very important topic, why I say it's connected with the climate change. So the innovations in adoption to climate change in dryland agriculture, both the topics, both the keywords, climate change and dryland agriculture, both are very important. And that is being taught by none other than the world authority in the same field, Professor Kadambot Siddique, who is the Hackett Professor of Agriculture Chair and Director of the UWA Institute of Agriculture in the University of Western Australia. So thank you very much, Dr. Siddique, for accepting our invitation in this important lecture series. And we are sure that with your talk, it will be a illuminating talk and will be beneficial to each one of us. The kind of audience which we have got, they are vice chancellors, they are directors, senior officers, and the other general audience we allow only through the live streaming. Friends, I can just tell you some brief about Professor Siddique. Professor Siddique was designated by the United Nations FAO as Special Ambassador for the International Year of Pulses 2016. He is having over 30 years of experience in agricultural research, teaching, and management in both Australia and overseas. He has developed a national and international reputation in agricultural science, especially in the fields of crop physiology, production agronomy, farming systems, genetic resources, breeding research in cereal, grain, and pasture legumes and oilseed crops. Professor Siddique has conducted research on adaptation of crops to dryland environments and phenological, morphological, physiological, biochemical, and genetic traits that enable crops to cope with various abiotic stresses. Dr. Siddique has published more than 500 scientific papers, a pride for any researcher, and book chapters. Professor Siddique is the highly cited researcher in the agricultural sciences as per the data available from the Thomson Reuters and Clarivate Analytics. As a result of Professor Siddique's personal research and with others with whom he collaborates, Australia has become one of the major grain legume exporting nations in the world. His pioneering research on chickpea has contributed enormously to the Australian chickpea industry, which is currently valued at more than $600 million per annum. Distinguished Professor Sanyang Agriculture University, adjunct professor in many universities, including Northwest Agriculture and Forestry University, Langzhou University, Guangzhou University, and Huzhou Agricultural University in China. He is the fellow of the Australian Academy of Technological Sciences and Engineering, Australian Agricultural Institute, and Indian National Academy of Agricultural Sciences. Professor Siddique was elected as fellow of the African Academy of Sciences, the first Australian to be elected to the Academy. He is also fellow of the Indian Society of Plant Physiology. Professor Siddique is the recipient of national and international awards, including Urbre Memorial Award, member of the Order of the Australia 2014, Western Australian Year of the Award, the Dan Hunaing Award by China's Gansu Provincial Government, and the Friendship Award from the Chinese Central Government. In recognition of his outstanding contributions to agricultural science and education in China over the years, in 2019, the Federation of Indian Association of Western Australia named Professor Siddique as the Western Australian Indian of the Year 2021. We are proud of you, Professor Siddique, and we are really proud that you have accepted our offer to deliver this lecture. I also just want to add that Professor Siddique has also trained numerous honors, MSc and PhD students. He has developed an extensive network of scientists with Australia and has also established a diverse range of overseas, including China, India, Turkey, Syria, Iraq, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Oman, Malaysia, and many more countries. So I'm really thankful again. Once again, I'm thankful to you. And he has offered that he can be requested by any agriculture university in India also for adjunct professor. I had a personal meeting with him. So thank you very much for extending your support for the Indian students. And being the alumni of Indian Agricultural Research Institute, we again look forward that we will have further strong association with you and guidance from you, and we'll seek your every kind of support. So over to you, Professor Siddique, for your talk. The floor is yours now. Please. Thank you once again.
Good morning, and thank you, Dr. Agarwal, for that kind introduction. I would also like to thank Dr. Mahapatra, who wrote the letter inviting me, and also the support from Dr. Agarwal. But also greetings to many colleagues. I can see many faces. I can see Professor Habib Singh there, collaborators, number of students, senior mentors. Some of them are from, I think, from Washington, joining us today. I also wanted to, right from the beginning, we have really developed for the last 2 decades, excellent collaboration with India, particularly the ICAR institutions. I won't name because far too many, and also some of the state agriculture universities. So this has been possible. And now the government of Australia, that is our Prime Minister, and Morrison, and your Prime Minister, Modi, has got together, and they have some ambitious plans to escalate that collaboration, particularly in capacity building and higher education. With that, now I'll try to share my presentation. Just bear with me for a few minutes. I think it should all work. So, can you all see my slides?
Yes, sir.
Yes. So I'm going to talk about adaptation to climate change in dryland agriculture for 2 reasons. Number one, most of my experience, most of my work has been in drylands because Australia is the driest human inhabited continent in the world. Number two, India has also got significant dryland systems. So the overview of my talk, Dr. Agarwal has kindly allowed me 45 minutes, but I'll try to finish earlier so that we can have some questions. I'll give some background. What is the definition of adaptation? Then I'll immediately come to Western Australian dryland agricultural system, where we have done some wonderful work, not only research, but also working with the farmers. We need to understand what is the past and future climate change, particularly rainfall, temperature, and CO2, or the greenhouse gases. We have been adapting. Australia hasn't got a long history in terms of the white occupation. It's only just over 200 years. Prior to that, it is the indigenous people. They never had any agriculture. For example, there's no plant species contributed by Australia into agriculture. Everything has been imported except eucalyptus, and also there's a nut called macadamia nut. So you can see in less than 100 years how we have adapted and developed an agricultural system. Greenhouse gas emission is very important, and that's relevant to India as well. I'll talk some, and I'll show one case study from some farmers, and then I'll draw some conclusions. So this is the state which I'm coming from, state of Western Australia. India is 1.3 times bigger than Western Australia. So it's almost size of India, but our population is only 2.6 million people. Of that 2.6 million, 2 million live in Perth. So this is the second largest state in the world. The first one is in the Soviet Union. So we are a large state. Then there are other states like South Australia. You know, Adelaide is the capital. Victoria, Melbourne, New South Wales is the Sydney. Then we got the Australian Capital Territory. Then Queensland, Brisbane. Then we have a Northern Territory, Darwin. and a small island state called Tasmania. Hobart is the capital. The graduates from University of Western Australia get very high wage because it also shows the prestigious university, but I'll come back to that. And Perth is a very affordable city. There are over 700 Australian securities exchanges in Perth, and also significant agriculture. So this is the city of Perth. This is the beautiful Swan River. And this is a large national park, Kings Park, about 2,000 hectares in the city. And then all this red tiled building is the University of Western Australia. So I'm just located here, so close to the riverside. So it's a shot of the university, and this is Perth, and my labs and offices are located here. So we got a global reputation, very internationally recognized. Many rankings we come in the 100 ranking. More importantly, we have established industry partnership. In my case, majority of our research is funded by farmers or the industry. So the same with the medical faculty as well. We are part of the group of 8, a coalition of the best research-intensive universities. There are 40 universities in Australia. Another point I want to emphasize here today, I have said that many times. When I first came to Australia to do my PhD here, I was surprised that we don't have any agriculture or veterinary or animal science universities in Australia. First, I thought this is mad. Now I realize that this is the best thing. We are a comprehensive university. There are probably half a dozen universities has got strong agriculture. So we can work with engineers, medical colleagues, and so on. So we don't have agriculture university. A lesson to be learned later on when we talk about the Indian higher education system. One of our graduates, Professor Barry Marshall, got a Nobel Prize in Medicine in 2005. He's the man who said that stomach ulcer is caused by Helicobacter pylori, not by stress. And he treated himself with antibiotics. And he's a very eminent person, pretty approachable. My ambition is to bring one day to India. I have traveled with him many places over the years. So he's a professor of clinical microbiology at our university. We follow various ranking, but if you go and Google academic ranking of world universities, we are ranked. Ranking is very hard. It goes up and down every year. Competition is coming from different parts, particularly from China. And they used to have life and agriculture science together. We were ranked around 24, 25, 24. When they separated agriculture science, bingo, we are ranked around 14 to 16, and we are number 1 in Australia. For a small group of people, which I lead, to get that ranking is quite hard, believe me or not. So 16th in the world, first in Australia for agriculture science. We don't have an agriculture university, and it's a small group of people working hard. I'll only show 2 slides of my institute, which I'm leading for the last, 15 or 16 years. And the strategic plan, the 3rd strategic plan was developed last year. It is available on the website. It is worth having a look at it. But the most important thing I want to say today about the Institute is that we break away from the traditional agriculture. We have, of course, sustainable agriculture, cropping, sustainable animal production, water for food production, food quality and human health. Here is a medical professor and a plant scientist leading engineering for agriculture. All your drones and sensors and artificial intelligence and robotics comes under that. More importantly, agribusiness ecosystem. So the Institute has got people coming from different disciplines and different faculties, if you like. So my job is to work with these people and then develop some very good science and technology for the challenges we're facing. Now, I have listed 5 global challenges here. The first one is increasing the world population. We know that the population will reach about 9.5 billion by 2050, no doubt about that. Energy demand. You can see the escalating price of the fossil fuel. Unfortunately, agriculture dependent so on fossil fuel. So that's something which we need to do. Manage the greenhouse gas emission. I'll touch on that today. And adapt to climate change and variability. The green revolution, we know that we have done a lot of damage to the ecosystem. So now we can't do that anymore. So we have to preserve the natural ecosystem and biodiversity. And southwest of Western Australia is one of the top hot spots of biodiversity, 10 in the world. Maintain global security. This is very important. The wars, lack of food, all that causes significant problem. You have now Sri Lankan refugees are coming to India. This is going to happen more and more. So we have to look after the global community. Otherwise, there won't be any peace around. What is adaptation? So take an Oxford dictionary. It is basically adjustments made in response to stress. Any stress, doesn't matter. Every day you are under stress. So how do you adapt? The adaptation should be based on the process to minimize the potential negative impact. In this case, variable climate. You're not going to completely shut it off. You have to minimize that the damage. And another point is the successful adaptation enhances a system's ability to deal with uncertain future change, not just the silo. So people just say, oh, we just look at the agriculture, but it is not the agriculture alone. There are other things, infrastructure and other, so on. This is the drylands of the world. And there is hyperarid, arid, semi-arid, and dry subhumid. There are a couple of points I want to make. One I already made. Australia is the driest human inhabited continent in the world. You in India, you have significant dryland system. In fact, Indian agriculture depends upon monsoon, so as other parts of the world. The second point is that the total area under dryland is about 42% of the global terrestrial area. Number two, something like about 35 to 36% of the global population, that's over 2.5 billion people live in drylands. So sometimes my vice chancellors comes and asks me, why should we do agriculture in this corner of Australia? So I just show this map and then they go away because it's a local problem, but it has got international relevance. So they say, go and do, we will support agriculture at the University of Western Australia. Now, climate change and adaptation, it is a very tricky one. You will ask that, look, how do we know that what's going to happen in next 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, and so on? So we want to live for the next 2 years. We're not worried about the future. Of course, that is a very short-sighted answer. The climate change and adaptation, we have to depend upon global greenhouse gas emission trajectories. IPCC has updated that. It looks very bleak at the moment. Global climate model projections, then we need to downscale. From downscaling to a particular place in India, for example, I take Delhi. What will happen to Delhi or in Perth? The impact and vulnerability assessment, need to do that. Again, these are based on modeling. Then we need to design adaptive response. But I call that uncertainty cascade. This is the problem why many politicians, including our own federal government, has not been very willing to come on board on climate change adaptation. This map clearly shows that if we do nothing by 2050, all those reddish areas are percentage changes in yield between the present and 2050. It's very depressing when you look at that, including Australia and many parts of India as well. But then you may argue the green bit looks good, the extreme latitudes where the cold temperature prevails. So if the global warming occurs, they will have a longer growing season and more production, but that's not sufficient enough. So given the current agricultural practices, given the current mitigation, we are going to be doomed. So we have to change. Very quickly, Australia is a very interesting continent. It has got all kinds of climate. Equatorial, then we have got that tropical, subtropical, and then we got some 2 large deserts, one in Western Australia and one in South Australia. And we have very significant temperate regions and grasslands. But when I did an analog map, shows how Australia different climate zones compared to those cities. For example, where I'm coming from is very much like Southern California. Those people attending from US would love that. Then Gulf of Mexico. And this northern part is like India. And somewhere here is New Delhi. Your New Delhi is sitting there. Sonora is not in Australia, but it looks like and it feels like Sonora. Sahara in the middle, Sonora. And you can see here San Francisco Bay Area. That's part of South Australia and Victoria. And then you got in Queensland and part of Northern Territory, you have got Florida, USA. So basically we can grow all kinds of crop, all kinds of animals at one part or the other part of Australia. Having said that, the grain belt is defined as this this golden colored area, that's our grain belt stretching from Western Australia all the way to Queensland. And that's 300 to 600 millimeter annual rainfall ISO height. I won't go into the detail. Our industry last year was about $60 billion worth. Again, the breakdown is provided, crops and the livestock provided quite a lot of significant income. 1.6 million people employed, about 2 million people, but 304,000 farmers, and 59% of the land is occupied by agriculture, one form or the other. Some of them are like rangelands. So what's going to happen in Australia? The projected change in key climate variables from 1990 as the baseline, 2030 not far away. Simply, it's going to be hotter. It's drying, rainfall is less, except up in the north, and the evaporation is going to increase. So news is like that. Just last week, climate change is driving up food prices. Farmers report warns climate crisis puts Australians' food supply. Climate change hurting supply chains. Climate change forcing up food cost. Aussies paying more food. So the farmers started called Farmers for Climate Action. The government was not coming forward, so the farmers said, enough is enough, we are going to take on. And so now slowly the government is coming on board. This is the state of Western Australia, and this is the agriculture region, again about 15.7 million hectares. I'll come back to that soon. So the agriculture region here, the southwest of Western Australia has got a Mediterranean type climate, meaning wet winter and dry summer. We're just now into our autumn. The temperature is looking good. We will be planting our crop in April, May. 16 million hectares of arable land, 4,000 farmers scattered around here. If I gave this talk 20 years ago, we had about 15,000 farmers. So you may ask what happened. So inefficient farmers are all moved out. The farming remained the same. So farmers became bigger and they were efficient operators. So you can see some of the areas, low rainfall, 250 to 325, 325 to 450 ISO height, and 450 to 500. So now let us take a few drivers. Rainfall of that corner, which I mentioned, that 16 million hectares, 1900, this is the recorded rainfall. You can see that it varies every year, as you expect, but lack of very wet years and decrease in variability, and driest on record was 2010, one of the driest record. And this is really happening from since 1975. So then people say, what is the other evidence? So what we did was we went and looked at all the dams in that southwest of Western Australia. So you can measure every year the dam flow. So we went and looked at it. Of course, it varies depending upon the rainfall. But from 1911 to 1974, the total volume of the water was 420 gigaliters. From 75, when the climate change started, to 2000, it became half nearly, 238 gigaliters. From 2001 to 2009, it became 137 gigaliters. From 2010 to 2020, it became 69 gigaliters. So the politicians has to believe this is real climate change. As a result, we have 2 desalination plants in Perth for drinking purpose, but also our culture has changed. So 14 years ago, my household may have used to double the water. Now we don't, because taxing on the water, and also we have been educated how to minimize water use. All our agriculture largely depend upon rainfall. So these are about domestic water supply. So the third driver is the temperature. So if you look at from 1910 onwards, it's a long-term record, and 0 means no change. But up to 75, we had a number of, if you like, cold events, cold days. As soon as from 75 onwards, we are seeing very hot. That's about 1.5 degree to 2 degrees Celsius above the average. And that's, again, an indication of climate change. These are all measured data. So what we have learned so far, lower average autumn and winter rainfall, increased seasonal variability, increased risk of prolonged drought within the season, higher average temperatures and evaporation rates, more intense tropical cyclones. So now I'm going to show you totally a surprising figure. So this is 2001 onwards and 21, 22, the last year's data, different grains, wheat in blue, oats, lupins or pulses, canola, and barley. Even in dry years, which I have circled here, remember 2010, we have been producing about 6 to 8 million tons. Look at that, last year, ever record 20 to 24 million tons. When the climate was drying, that's where the technological innovation and adaptation occurred. So the climate is drying, but the research and development and farmer adoption helped us to beat this climate change. So let us ask some very big questions, whether it is in India or in Australia. Big questions in relation to climate change. The drivers are rainfall, temperature. Light is not very important for us, maybe in Europe, CO2. So what is the impact of climate change in agriculture? You can ask at any level. What are the risks and opportunities? Will farmers, industry be able to adapt with the existing technology? If not, what is needed to adapt? And okay, we did that. Government put a lot of money, farmers put, then you have adapted. But what is the impact of that adaptation? So if that adaptation has no impact, then we are wasting our time. We also have a sort of people think that production and greenhouse gas emissions are interrelated. Not necessarily. I think we can decouple. I'll convince you that. And that depends upon the soil and environmental conditions, farmer, farm manager, resource availability, for example, India versus Australia, farming technology, crop input, various relevant policies. This is so important. So the key cropping practices for system integration, I won't read everything. For example, diversifying cropping rotation or sequestering more carbon back to the soil. Can we do that? Or reducing fallow system in India, or in our case, summer fallow. So increase the crop yield, decouple and reduce greenhouse gas emission. And I'll show some data. So that will lead to social economics, farming profitability, local community development, rural employment and farm sustainability. Societal values, resource conservation, land use efficiency, rural community development, and consumer perspective and satisfaction. And of course, we need to look after our soil and environment. So when I was an undergraduate student, I'm originally from Kerala, Dr. Agarwal, I never learned climate change or adaptation. The only thing I learned is agriculture meteorology, so as at IRI. But at UWA, what we are doing now is we have significant emphasis on climate-ready crops and animals, smart genetics and physiology, conservation agriculture. We need to quantify the greenhouse gas emission, CO2, nitrous oxide, and methane. Soil fertility, soil biology, and carbon sequestration is very important at undergraduate and postgraduate level. Then we got a whole gamut of tools, biotechnological tools, biophysical modeling, economic modeling, because we don't know what's going to happen next 10 or 20 years. So we have to use some very interesting modeling. And we have a farm which I look after from the institute perspective, a 1,600 hectare farm. I'll show a couple of slides on that. More importantly, partnership with the community and the industry. Strong undergraduate and postgraduate program. And climate change is something which we need to have international collaboration, including with India. Australia is not a large producer compared with India in terms of wheat, only 25 to 30 million tons, $9 billion industry. Western Australia produces roughly half, and our average yield is 2 to 2.5 tons because it's dry land. Of course, some farmers are getting 4 to 5 tons per hectare. So in a Mediterranean type environment where I am operating, so people plant in April, May. We will be planting very soon. Low rainfall coming in, low temperature, high humidity, low evaporation. People think, oh, it's wonderful. As soon as the reproductive phase starts, from booting onwards, high temperature, low humidity, high evaporation, low or no rainfall, similar to your northern Indian conditions, what we call terminal drought and yield reduction and quality. This is our clear problem. Now, I have plotted here years from 1860s. The data is available up to 2022, and the yield in tons per hectare of wheat, because we can get all that, because the wheat is delivered by the farmer, and we know how much wheat is coming. So when the white man came to Australia, 200 years ago. They thought that can bring English varieties and make a big agriculture. Miserable failure, micronutrient, soil problem. Then R&D started in Australia, and then we started increasing the yield per hectare. Remember, it's a dryland, 5.6 kilogram per hectare per year, partly due to breeding, partly due to agronomy. But then I told you 1975 onwards, we have significant climate change. Yet we have been increasing yield at the rate of 20 kilogram per hectare per year, except we are now seeing significant variation, season to season variation. That's a big problem for us. Now, there are two approaches for us to go forward. One is agronomic approach. The other one is the genetics approach. I won't go into the detail, but the simple relationship exists between yield of a wheat crop or any grain crop and the water use. So I have plotted in-season rainfall here and then grain yield. So let us look at a farmer is getting about 250 millimeter water, except without any irrigation in the growing season. Then go and look at the relationship. There is a relationship between water use and yield. The slope of that line is about 20 kilogram hectare per millimeter. And the slope intercept is about 110 millimeters of water is lost from the system due to soil evaporation. But if you go and look at the farmer's yield, is well below in some cases from the current potential. So we can go and bridge the gap. The next one is, can we change this potential from 20 to 25 kilogram per hectare per millimeter by developing, for example, drought-tolerant, deep-rooted species, heat-tolerant, etc. So you can shift the slope, and also you can shift the intercept. And with the same amount of water, 250 millimeter, I can go up to, say, for example, 6 ton potential yield. So I'm not doomed and gloomed about climate change because we still got a window of opportunity to beat the climate change. Coming to the agronomy, zero tillage conservation agriculture, very popular in the United States, Brazil, Argentina, Canada, and Australia. Many advantages: minimum soil disturbance, stubble retention, widely adopted. Early sowing is possible. You're saving fuel. Otherwise, farmers go and plow round and round, better organic matter, etc. For example, the carbon sequestration, 1% of carbon is equivalent to 33 tons per hectare. So the summary of a conservation cropping package, again, I can give a talk some stage fully on that. Stop plowing. I'll show you some example. Plant early. Use zero seeders. Reduce seed rates. Then keep stubble if possible. Some farmers want to graze the stubble, but don't burn. And that's one of the things which is happening in parts of India. So this farmer is a close friend of mine. He has not plowed his property or land for the last 20 years. He has got nearly 20,000 hectares of land. And here he's planted canola, and the previous crop was wheat, and make sure that every drop of rain goes in for potential use by the crop. So he uses the precision agriculture. This is previous years of wheat. He planting it very close, no plowing. So any fertilizer left from previous crop, if it is a dry year, immediately that's available. And also small light showers come earlier on, channelized through the stubble, and that comes into the furrow and better establishment. So that farmer, for example, in 2006, he got a water use efficiency of 16 kilograms per hectare per millimeter, 2 tons. Some of his neighbors who doesn't follow no-till technology got nothing that year, just based on conservation agriculture. So a lot of people, farmers and even researchers come and ask how long it's going to take. There are 4 phases. Initial phase, 0 to 5 years of the no-tillage technology, rebuild aggregates, low organic matter, low residue, require nitrogen immobilization because of the carbon-nitrogen ratio. The next phase is 5 to 10 years, increase organic matter, increase crop residue. Consolidation phase is 10 to 20 years, high organic matter, high crop residue, and then some of our farmers are now in the maintenance stage. So high organic matter, high crop residue, more moisture is increased, nutrient cycling, and so on. So that's very important. If you look at this data, which we published some time ago, 25 long-term experiments from Australia, China, Mexico, Brazil, Spain, UK, and US. So the x-axis is years under the system of the zero tillage, 0 to 50 years, and then relative yield change, the dashed line. So you can clearly see there's a lot of scatter, But the point I want to emphasize is that it's about taking time, nearly 5 years to get the system kicking in. Now, Dr. Agarwal mentioned that the last 20 years I have been working very intensively in China. This is in the Gansu province, northwest of China, lowest plateau, very cold, minus 35 degrees. And cropping is done in spring, summer. And this is a lowest plateau, loamy soils, huge evaporation loss. So we have developed a plastic mulch technology. And because there's a lot of onshore oil drilling, and as a result, the byproduct of the petroleum plastic, we have looked at the thickness versus thin recyclable plastic, colored plastic, and that technology is now mechanized and being used. I'll show you one data here. This is from an experiment where we have published maize planted on the same day. This is a ridge furrow plastic mulch system, no plastic mulch, 7 to 11 tons per hectare. The other one is 2 to 3.5 tons. Water use efficiency for a C4 plant, 19 to 30 kilogram per hectare per millimeter, and in this case, 7 to 10. So why did it happen? 2 reasons. Number one, the temperature when the summer crop is coming is very low, still low in the soil. So the mulch acted as a blanket. Number two, all the moisture is retained. And you can achieve this with the straw mulch as well to a large extent. Much of that is written up in a book, and it is available with Springer called Conservation Agriculture. Now, I wanted to show Australia's greenhouse gas emission. This is so important. So people say agriculture is bad. Yes, 17% of the total emission of that 12% come from animals. We don't have a lot of rice in Australia. Land use change, forestry, waste, transport, industrial process, stationary energy. This is from the coal plants and also from the thermal power plants and so on. And this is the fugitive emission coming from your cylinders and the fridges and when you store. So the number one emitter is stationary and the fugitive emission, and agriculture comes number 2, and of that methane is a number 1 in Australia. So when you look at the biology of enteric methane, you can see that methane is about 55 megajoules per kg energy. It's a sheer waste. Can we reduce that? Can be that diverted for the animal to produce more wool, more milk, or more meat in some cases? So what we have done is that one of our professors working in my institute, Professor Phil Werko, he's an expert in that area. He has got in vivo and in vitro measurements on rumen microbiology, and then he can take it to the field scale and then look at how much methane is emitted. So then he developed a hypothesis that if we feed some novel forages, particularly Australian native plants, and then compare that with autumn chaff, and he was able to show that some of the species were higher than methane emission mLs gram per dry matter than the autumn chaff, but there was many species which are looking very good. Then what, say for example, one species, Ermophila glabra, which is an acacia species, which is from Australia. Then we took to our farm. This is about 2.5 hours drive from Perth. And we have wheat and canola and pulse production and livestock. We also have in carbon production in certain areas. So we planted those particular shrubs in the landscape. You can see sheep in the background. And then we also planted in the rows with the annual normal pastures. So it's a solution where grazing animals eat certain forages, which reduces the emission of methane significantly. Now let us move on integrated farming with the system. How can we reduce the greenhouse gas? This is a work we recently published in PNAS. And what we did was that it is a 12 consecutive years of experiment, 2006 to 2017 in northern China. And we looked at various systems of annual crops. And we were able to show that increasing yields by 15 to 49% farm returns, and also reducing the greenhouse gas by 17.3%. So nothing magic about it. We have key issues: environmental concerns, high food demand, low arable land, scarce water, low farm income. What do we want the outcome? Increased crop yield and quality, enhanced net income, and reduced carbon footprint. So we need a system integration. In this case, we used relay, cool and warm crops within field rotations so that you have legumes and cereals coming in, soil cover, it can be straw in your case, and we also used plastic mulch, best management practices. So during crop growing season, interspecies interaction, I'll show you coordinated competition, water nutrient sharing, vigorous maize growth resource from both strip and compensatory effect. Here is an example, field pea. This is the semiless field peas planted at the time before the summer, real summer starts, and then maize strip cropping, and the co-benefit is enormous. Again, this data is too much, but I just want to focus you on graph A, grain yield, and graph D is the footprint per yield kilogram carbon dioxide equivalent tons per grain. So on the bottom x-axis, you have peas, mono and relay, maize, mono and relay, wheat, mono and relay, and maize, mono and relay. So basically what we can show is that by relay cropping, we were able to get more yield in all cases. And if you look at the carbon footprint, the relay cropping has significantly reduced the carbon emission. So the carbon dioxide equivalent was reduced. Simply a cropping system approach. It's a very wonderful paper. I feel very proud of it. The other one is the pulses in the system. I don't need to teach Indian researchers about the value of pulses. In rotation with cereals, with numerous nodules on plant that fixes the nitrogen from the atmosphere, leading to significant benefits to cropping system, such as reducing use of inorganic nitrogen. The urea price is so high, it's time the legume scientists really promote legumes in the system, increasing soil organic carbon and decreasing the carbon footprint of the agro ecosystem. This is another paper we published in Land Degradation and Development. The core benefits, if you focus on the graph A, this is the pea mobilizing crop. For example, your chickpea has got organic anions excreted through the root system, such as malate and citrate. Those organic anions can solubilize the soil-bound phosphate and make it available to for its own use, but also the cereal crop. Another one is sharing micronutrients within the rhizosphere. That is the phytosidose then they can mobilize the iron and zinc. So here it is, you're really using complementary skills of different species to make more available of micronutrients as well as the major nutrients. Now moving on to the cropping system, one of the unfortunate things happened globally. If I went to the space and took a satellite image about 20 or 30 years ago, the Earth would have had so much of diversity of crops. Now it is so sad. 3 crops dominate: rice, wheat, maize. I was taking a fast train from Beijing to Xi'an 2 years ago. It's all maize, maize, maize at that time. And I asked my colleague, it's one variety, single variety, probably hybrid maize. So we have driven away Asia's forgotten crops and also some of our future smart crops. So we need to look at a multidimensional benefits. So benefit of traditional underutilized crop, food and nutritional security, which is so important for a country like India, when you have 35 to 40% of the children under 5 are chronically malnourished and lactating mothers. And these crops are resilient to climate change because they are adapted to the harsh environment and low input agricultural system. And of course, we need to conserve the biodiversity and culture diversity. Improve livelihood. Many of these crops, when processed, and for example, you have quinoa, it's a wonder food. And a lot of city people are going to buy some of these things. So there is economic and social benefits. Another data I want to show, diversifying cropping system. Again, this is a published work. So here, if you look at the graph on the bottom, it is cereal, which is a durum wheat, 100% emission. So the axis is carbon footprint, kilogram carbon dioxide equivalent, kilogram per grain. And you can see here, in the case of a pulse rotation, it's 34% reduction straight away. One good thing happened in Australia. Again, if you look at here, this is the data from 1990 to 94, 95. The pie is small, $2.963 billion. And majority of our crops was wheat. Now, if you look at now 2013 to 2018, so you can see the diversity, including chickpea and canola and barley and things coming in. Wheat is still important crop, but wheat's dependent on wheat has reduced. This has significant implications in terms of greenhouse gas emission, but also the market stability and income to the farmers. So the decoupling land productivity and greenhouse gas, I have already told that the system boundaries of the greenhouse gas estimation, including emission from off-farm, in this case, electricity, fuel, seeds, fertilizers, pesticides, and mulching materials. Then you got the on-farm applications. Then you got crop growth and crop harvest and volatilization and crop residue, the greenhouse gas contribution. So you need to understand the leaching behavior, denitrification, what is the role of soil organic carbon and mineralization and N2O. Until we understand the system, that system is to be locally based, not just plugging in from US and say it will be the same. I'll show you why it is not going to be the same. India and Australia will be different. We have so much of studies done on greenhouse gas emission from Western Australian cropping system because our Greenhouse Gas Commission in Canberra told that they are going to use the European data. We objected that European data is totally wrong for an Australian environment. So for producing 1 ton of grain, we need about 304 kilogram carbon dioxide equivalent is emitted. But when we look at that, majority of that emission coming from production of urea and superphosphate, 35%. There is some hydrolysis, 27%. Transportation and inputs and wheat outside the farm, 12%. Farm machinery, 8%. This is outside the farm. Nitrous oxide emission from the paddock is only 9%. Production of herbicide, it is outside the farm. So don't come and blame the farmers that farmers are the net emitters. No, farmers are only doing a little bit of emission. Quite a lot is coming from outside. Because of our efficient nitrogen fertilizer use and low nitrous oxide emission from our cropping system, the greenhouse gases emission from Western Australia and Australia is low, and we were able to change the figure in the Australian Gas Commission. Much of this innovation is already published in many papers, but also we have a book published some time ago. Now, Mr. Chairman, I'm getting closer to my talk. We all talk about agriculture carbon sequestration. I'm really worried because a lot of people go and say, let us put some money, the farmers will store a lot of carbon. It's wrong. So there are two processes here, carbon release process, which is in blue, and then carbon input process, which is coming from, for example, photosynthesis is one of the best things because that's how you capture your carbon. Then carbon in roots, plant residues, erosion is taking away, animals eating. Then the soil organic carbon is consisting of various pools. Then you got labile soil carbon, easily decomposed, leads to carbon dioxide release. That's because of the fast microbial process. Then soil organic matter, slow microbial process. Finally, what we call stabilized to soil carbon sequestered. So it's very small amount, it's going to take time. So we need a good understanding of carbon sequestration before we jump in the gun. Just one set of data here from 1990 to 2006, 3 systems. So it is the CO2 carbon sequestration in percentage. So if you look at the top graph, is based on pastures. So it's about annual increase is only small, 0.11% per year. And that also in the top, say 10, 15 centimeter soil layer. Then the case of second graph, which is based on cropping, and that's only 0.08% per annum. And then I thought there will be more with orchards and vineyards, but orchards and vineyards are also very slow, partially because low density and low growth in winter and so on in certain periods. So that's only 0.04%. So the take-home message is that we are not going to change the soil carbon just like that overnight by adopting. So we have to really look at what is the drivers in each soil and each system. Case study, Cindy Stevens and Simon Walworth, these are husband and wife. Simon was one of our graduates. He lives about 250 kilometers east of Perth, 3,000 hectares of crop, 1,000 breeding ewes. This is a sheep, 280 breeding cows, average rainfall, 280 millimeters, Annual rainfall is 374. Sandy soils. Bingo. He has got the data, or his forefathers have collected the data. 1910 onwards, look at that area. The rainfall is definitely declining, similar to what I showed for the state. Let us look at on-farm emission. So the on-farm emission is per year, he calculated 2,165 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent he emit per year. Of that, cropping is emitting 1,079 tons from the 3,000 hectares. The livestock, both cow and sheep, 1,286 tons from 400 hectares. Then he has been able to really catalog pre-farm emission, electricity, crop residue, fuel, lime, fertilizer, purchased livestock, manure, and majority of the emission is from the animals, which is 41%, which is the methane, the red one. Then he's got the nitrous oxide coming 39% of that, and 20% is CO2. So this is a farmer trying to quantify emission from his farm. So he has got various kinds of things going on: tactical response to climate change, soil cover, wider rows, narrow rows, machinery comparison, sowing time, grazing, chemical fallow, and also soil moisture monitoring. From there, what he did was he found that certain areas of his farm is marginal for good crop production. Why wasting resources? For example, saline or poor sandy soils where cropping is marginal. So he's planting species like what I showed you before that can be grazed and that can also store carbon for a long term. Now he's working on, through a process, to develop a self-funded carbon project where they retain carbon credits within their farm business to offset emission. The importance of local knowledge is so important, whether it is the traditional knowledge, and we did some work with Kerala Agriculture University recently and published that in various papers and books. Now, don't underestimate the power of technology. The 4 industrial revolutions. The first one, iron plow, mechanical reaper, cotton gin, and telegraph. The second and most important, Nobel Prize winning Haber and Bosch process. Otherwise, we would not have been able to feed the world. The Mendelian genetics, the tractors, rail, steamship, and telephone. Then comes the third revolution, control trafficking, quantitative genetics, including genomics, internet, and mobile phone. What next? I think digital scape, artificial intelligence, they're all working, but our job is to use them, whether it is in the agriculture, fisheries, or in the biodiversity programs. The last bit of my talk, don't forget about the farmers. These are the farmer groups in Western Australia. I'm very proud to say that I was involved in forming these groups way back in 2000. I was part of that team. 4 or 5 of us got together with the farmers, started with 4 groups. Now it's 60 grower groups, all the way up in the north and mostly in the southwest. State-based, non-political, producer voice for the members or farmers members from all sectors of the industry, focused research, development, and extension. And this is where a lot of us now spend time. We can go to the farmers field and do experiments, and they're willing to accommodate us. And the funding is largely coming from farmers-driven levy to the government. Another point, a lot of times people say farmers are getting old. No, in our case, a lot of young people are coming to farming because the farming is a profitable industry and people are now moving towards farming based on science and technology. Recently, there's a publication called Fork in the Road, Farmers for Climate Action, I mentioned. They just voiced, it's a nice publication, but I will tell 2 things here. One is early adoption of sustainable practices. Adaptation alone will not be enough. It must be paired with a drastic and urgent reduction in global greenhouse emission if we're to avert the extraordinary crisis that unmitigated planetary heating would bring. So over the long term, the most important action that both business and government can take will be to reduce emission of greenhouse gases. Deep and lasting cuts in emission in the food supply chain will deliver long-term benefits to consumers, exporters, farmers, food manufacturers, retailers, and the many other businesses involved in food production distribution. These are not my words, these are farmers' words. So on the x-axis, climate change is happening. On the y-axis, the benefit from the adaptation. I've already said we can achieve incremental adaptation using varieties, planting time, spacing, stubble, water, tillage, and so on. But soon that will plateau off. Then the climate is still changing. Then we need to look at the system adaptation, climate change-ready crops and animals, climate-sensitive precision agriculture, diversification and risk management. If the mitigation is not happening, we're going to be in trouble. That's when transformational adaptation, agriculture may be simply going out of window. This happened in places like Jordan. An entire community was shifted because there's not enough rainfall there. So let us not reach that stage. We have to mitigate as well. Conclusion, Mr. Chairman. So adaptation to climate change is about research, development, innovation. We must understand past changes, in your case, India, and past adaptation. People have been farming for the last thousands of years in India. Improve system understanding, quantifying the impact of change. We must understand future climate change. So regional downscaling, Indian Meteorological Department is one of the strongest in the world, but let them involve downscaling to regional scale. Some excellent work is going on in some ICAR institutions on that. Uncertainty and risk management. Farmers are poor. They don't know, so we need to really advise them. What is the uncertainty? What is the risk management? Breeding, increased water use efficiency, heat resistance, both in crops and animals, maximize benefit from elevated CO2. Because carbon dioxide fertilization effect, we can gain some short-term gains. I think the seasonal forecasts are not good enough. We need timely forecast, not tomorrow's weather. We need 3-4 months ahead, even 6 months ahead. And it will be more critical even in the future. We also need to understand what is the threshold. And new pests and weeds and diseases will come because the climate is changing. Some people are perfectionists. They say, I will do only when I have all the answers. No, communicate with the farmers what we know now, and what we don't know, you work with them. And simply sitting and saying that, look, climate change is going to happen only 50 years. I won't be living at that time. And seeing nothing, hearing nothing, and doing nothing is no longer an option. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Siddique, for this wonderful talk and wonderful ideas and a wonderful conclusion which you have drawn. I'll not repeat the words you have just told, but I want to just say that Professor Mahapatra, I would like to him give the chairman's remark. But before that, I can invite a few questions which I see in the chat box, if you allow. Professor Siddique, can we read those questions?
English is water, agriculture.
Yeah, I can read for you. The first question is from Mr. Rameshwar Kamal, and he's asking on the use of water. Is it due to climate change or increased use of water by agriculture over the years and growing population in Western Australia?
So I didn't get the question very clearly. What I'm saying is that the climate change is reducing the water availability because it's all based on rainfall. So rainfall has declined. There is a reduction of 30% rainfall, and hence we have to efficiently use that water. So I showed the rainfall decline from 1910 onwards, but I also showed the data for the dams. So the rainfall comes in, the water flows into the dam. It is just a surrogate to show that not only the rain gauge, but also our dams have been going low. It's not because of the increased consumption, it is because of the increased input. Mm-hmm. Is that the answer?
Okay. So another question is by Dr. Ranjit Singh, and he is complimenting you for your talk.
Thank you.
And at the same time, he's asking, if you retain 100% crop residue, what challenges do the farmers face in pest management?
Yeah, this is a very, very good question. There are a number of problems of crop residue retention. As you know, Punjab farmers, we just completed a review. It's under with colleagues from PAU. When you produce a 6-7 ton crop, approximately 4 tons of stubbles are produced. So one of the biggest challenges is that operating the machinery becomes difficult. So that's why farmers use a matchstick and burn it so that they can pass it. The second aspect is that the time lag between that crop and next crop is so slow, so they are not able to biodegrade that straw. So we could have other techniques like ammoniated straw. The question asked is the pest. We looked at in our system, and if you have followed the rotation of the crops, not cereals after cereals after cereals, then that's not a major issue. So we haven't seen disease carryover, pest carryover in a sustainable rotation with a diversified rotation. Whereas sure, if you have only wheat after wheat after wheat, or wheat and rice, there is no other crops in between, then there is a risk of having higher disease and pest. Straw can be managed, either can be baled and taken out, or also one can, I didn't show that, what we collect the straws in windrows, and we can have a small burning at very close to the planting, so you still can reduce the amount of stubble. Then applying some urea, and then the carbon-nitrogen ratio is managed, so you can have a better, faster biodegradation and making the organic matter available. So different systems we can do that. It's a good question.
Dr. Venkateswalu is asking, what do you think of the real scope in India in cultivated soils with high rates of oxidation of carbon?
Yeah, so I think in the tropical area of India, it will be so fast. A lot of organic matter gets degraded very fast, whereas in the cooler areas, it will be less. So I think one need to really understand the whole cycle. This is why I'm saying that don't go and say the farmer is going to sequester a lot of carbon. I would like to see more studies, including soil biology. There were studies in the past, like Professor Rajendra Prasad and others who taught me soil chemistry and plant nutrition at IRI and at a master's level. Those days, soil biology was ignored. We must now have better understanding of the soil biology dynamics. And then I would like to see certain agroecological zones, the carbon input and output, and then some long-term studies. I'm sure ICAR must be taking. They are the kind of things we need to really emphasize for future, and the modeling.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Vishwanath from IARI, he's asking, he's complimenting you and asking to what extent we can reduce the GHG emissions from agriculture while maintaining the necessary growth required to meet growing population.
Well, I think in my talk, I have showed examples how we can reduce methane from animals by approach which I showed was using novel forage species. You can also change the rumen microbiology, where you can have certain bacteria which can reduce the emission. Cropping system, for example, I showed we can reduce. Fertilizer utilization, we can reduce. Your rice system, I haven't touched, where you can reduce upland versus huddled rices. Then you can also increase, Professor Chinnuswamy is a plant physiologist, get the photosynthesis up, more carbon capture. Then tree plantations in marginal lands, community agroforestries. And let us look at, overall, I'm very happy that if you look at the global green index, many parts of the world, awareness has gone, there's a lot more trees has been planted, and it's one of the best ways to capture. Increase the photosynthesis, better agronomic practices, and then soil management practice we can reduce. And animals need to be looked very carefully. India is emitting significant amount of methane because you have probably the largest animal population in the world.
Thank you.
Ruminants in particular. Ruminants, sorry.
And one last question by Dr. A.K. Singh, Director IARI. Is complimenting you and then asking, what is the international price of one carbon credit presently?
It is variable. And for example, in Australia, it is, I have to get the figure right, it's between $30 to $40 per ton, and that's not good enough. Whereas in Europe, it is much better. I think that needs to be looked, because farmers are not simply going to give up their business for the benefit of the city people. So we need to look at it. More importantly, I don't believe a lot of these things people say they're going to store more carbon in an annual cropping cycle. I showed you the data. So I need to see the evidence clearly that by giving this much of money or doing this practice, where is the evidence that carbon is stored? Carbon is so mobile, labile, and many things may be short-term in the top 10 centimeter. So the government of India and the government of Australia just declared $200 million. And one of the farmer came yesterday in the news and he was just saying that it's a waste of time in a very dry land and they're giving money to plant trees. These trees are going to take 10 to 20 to 30 years even to grow 1 or 2 centimeters because there is no water for the trees to grow and photosynthesis. So it varies, Professor Chinnaswamy, but we need to look at that as well. But I think we need to really look at the sequestration. Agriculture people has to take it seriously and then give the correct advice to the government and the farmers.
Thank you, Professor Siddique, for response to the queries. And most of the persons, they are just complimenting your presentation and the way you have presented the slides, the points, the conclusion, everything is really remarkable.
I was a bit nervous to do it from my work, and because I got 2 monitors. So I said to my secretary, I'm not going to work today. This is a serious talk, so I'm going to do it from home because when you do. The other thing is that I learned a lot of the basics from Kerala. I think I can see the Vice Chancellor of Kerala Agriculture University sitting there, Dr. Chandra Babu, a good friend of mine, and from IRI. And I just mentioned a few people like Dr. Rajendra Prasad, who is now held in US. And some of the basics I learned has helped me a lot. And certainly my connection with India is still significant. Dr. Mahapatra, ICAR institutions, you go and look at, the other day I had a call from the Australian High Commission, Canberra, and asked me to go and list, they should not have asked me that, list my papers with India, and only last 2 years, 2021. So I just saw that it was 65 papers in good journals with the Indian collaborators. Again, that is only marginal to what I have done with China. But my ambition is now to work with you, Dr. Agarwal and Dr. Mahapatra, and get this capacity building going. We just signed, after a number of years of try with the ACSIR, Academy for Scientific and Industrial Research, Professor Sangwan, a deal where 10 PhD students will come to University of Western Australia, not necessarily in agriculture alone. They will need to spend at least 1 year here and a joint PhD, the first ever joint PhD program between India and my university. This is a very difficult one to get going through the bureaucracy. So I would like to do that with ICAR, particularly the Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose scholarship with your help and support.
We'll discuss it. So now I request the chairman of this session, Dr. T. Mahapatra, the Director DARE and DG ICAR, to give the chairman's remarks.
Dr. Agarwal, thank you very much. And profuse thanks to Dr. Siddique for an excellent exposition of science, management, and future strategy and everything all together. Summarization of the whole thing is first of all not required. And, so much information in one lecture. And very importantly, comparing, Australia with the whole world and more specifically India with regard to agroclimate and how agriculture is being done. And the lessons learned in Australia, how they can be actually used in India. So I think that is the main theme that we understand from your lecture, Dr. Siddique. I believe this long experience of yours in Australia and various aspects, starting from whether it is conservation agriculture and building carbon, and subsequently farmers' own experience, the traditional knowledge system, and how to really move ahead. Why we can't really promote or encourage agriculture? Why we should be worried about it? That is one thing which I was looking at your slide, and you said that wheat is all rain-fed in your country, 2 to 2.5 tons and all that. And why we should actually use so much of water, underground water to irrigate crops. And why not promote, productivity under unfit situations? I think that's a very important point, actually, given the climate change happening. And more importantly, when you say crop residues all going there, and the carbon increase is so low, actually, under cropping systems, and despite all residue going there. And so that is something which we need to really learn more, and then see how fast and how long we should be actually working in this direction, so that we build sufficient carbon, because carbon is so important, and Indian soils are so grossly deficient and in carbon. So this is a very, very important issue, and Professor Ratan Lal is pushing this at a global level. And I believe we should have very structured deliberation on this subsequently, that how do we build our carbon content in soils of India in various situations. Somebody said that the oxidation taking place in our soils, and what would be actually the scope to sequester carbon as much as it is required in Indian soils. The way it is depleting, if we continue this way, it would be a serious threat to our, whole sustainable production system and food system that we are talking about. So a lot more, actually, if I start elaborating on each point, it will take a long time. But I believe that we all have noted down, and we will prepare some action plan, based on all those points you have highlighted today. And, certainly it will have some specific discussion on issues that you have highlighted. Photosynthesis increase that you are talking about, what should be the limit? And only enhancing photosynthesis itself may not help. There would be a lot of biomass. Then how do we partition it? What should be the sink size limit? How do we actually increase that? So that too under rain-fed ecosystem ecology. And ultimate point that you said is the ecosystem and management and all that. And small interventions at early stage, and subsequently making it sustainable based on ecosystem, and taking advantage of ecosystem services. And how do we really do that? I believe that's a big challenge. We had some discussion at the National Academy of Agriculture Sciences, and we will have some aspect discussed there as well. And you suggested that bringing Nobel laureate to India. We'll be extremely happy to actually invite and welcome him, either in ICAR or the National Academy, to have him and have a lecture and have interaction to understand more about. So anyway, so without prolonging it, I believe a lot more to take home. And it's always a pleasure, Dr. Siddique, to learn from you, listen to you, and the kind of linkage that you have with India in terms of building our human resource in the form of training students. And that's a huge contribution. And we all appreciate your contribution, Dr. Siddique, that, so many students not only get trained, also we, publish together. And, that's another aspect. And people always ask, what is your collaboration? And there's a beautiful example how University of Western Australia and India and various universities are collaborating and getting a lot of mileage out of that collaboration in terms of human resource enabled in a big way. And obviously that will contribute to Indian agriculture, very prominently. And I'm sure as we go along, they should be further strengthened. It's not only Dr. Chandrababu and Kerala Agriculture University, benefiting, the whole country is benefiting. So I believe, we would appreciate your continuous support and help in building our human resource. And more importantly, these strategies for our Indian agriculture to remain sustainable. I think that is the key message that you have given. And whether it is animal agriculture or crop agriculture, and reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and having more carbon sequestration, all are so important. Building strategy would be very, very important. So with these words, I once again congratulate you, Dr. Siddique, for an excellent lecture. And always it is a pleasure to listen to you, and it is today is no exception. And all my colleagues would agree that it's a great learning experience today. And so much you spoke about Australia, and we are looking at how we fit in, and so much are common. Yes. Certainly, there's a long way to go for India, to have sustainable food systems, firmly taking a footage in the country. So once again, thank you very much. Azadi Mahotsav, this is which lecture, Dr. Agrawal?
Thank you, sir.
42nd lecture.
This is a 50th lecture.
50th lecture. So you are at the 50th.
Lucky 50.
Yeah.
and while I got your attention, 20 years ago, nearly 20 years ago, we signed the agreement with the ICAR. So I would say probably one of the first ever universities in Australia signed an agreement with, and that agreement is still valid. We have been So we will still farm it up in terms of actions, and we'll discuss with you, Dr. Siddique, more. And profuse thanks once again. A big to Dr. Siddique. In these digital systems, very difficult to convey your feelings. But then, so thank you very much. So thanks, Dr. Agrawal, for taking this course forward, and 50th lecture and another 25 left. Yes. And in 75 lecture series of the Azadi Amrit Mahotsav, one in every week, it's a big task, but you have been doing so well. And so certainly we should be able to finish this up before August. So thank you. And thanks to all of you. Professor R.B. Singh never misses a lecture. So you are here, sir. And always it's a very, extremely happy situation to see you, and a great pleasure to see you. So thanks to all of you who are here today.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir. I, on behalf of ICAR, sir, would like to thank Professor Siddique for this excellent talk, and especially the 50th talk. And we are looking for another 25 talks, and I would like to request you, if you can request the Nobel laureate, if he can also deliver a talk. We'll be happy to have as one of the speakers in this lecture series.
Let me try.
Yeah, please.
You will talk medical talks. Yeah.
No problem, sir. We can accept this. And I'm thankful to all my colleagues, the senior vice chancellors, the directors, the senior staff from ICAR, and everybody who is attending this, and all those who are attending through the live streaming and through another portal. So there are many hundreds numbers who are attending through the other media. So thanks to everybody, and once again, thanks to Professor Siddique for this wonderful talk.
Thank you.
See you again on 4th. Namaskar.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.